Amazing afternoon. It is Bit Buddha back again with another episode of the Blacks in Cybersecurity podcast. And today we have Gabriel Davis, who is an energy management and CPCE RT lead at
Right.
Snyder Electric, right? So I was looking at his LinkedIn just now, and I was speaking to him. This brother, he's traveled the world for the cyber stuff, right? So he has a lot of wisdom to share for us. So I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me. As I said before, Gabriel Davis, go by Gabe to a lot of the folks that know me well. So what does that mean? Energy management, CP certainly, right? So for those, just to introduce, so it's the corporate product cyber emergency response team. So what that means is when Schneider Electric manufactures products, specifically in their energy management business unit, right? So think everything from smart grid technology, mobile battery systems, you name it, everything in between. The products have a certain life cycle that we have to make sure that we are maintaining. So obviously, if there are any vulnerabilities associated with these product lines, all of those at some point make it across my desk for the final review. So when we're doing our security notification disclosures, when we're communicating with researchers that are actually going out and using these devices and products, customers themselves, all of the energy management products are led at the CP cert through my team.
It's like a central hub that you kind of collect tech for all of your products.
Right. So there are different business units at Schneider Electric. So energy management being one of them. There's industrial automation, a lot of products. If you're familiar with Schneider Electric, it's almost a 200-year-old manufacturing company, French-based. And there are a lot of things that you may not be thinking about. If you're familiar with APC, the units that you use for battery backups, that's the Schneider Electric product. If you're familiar with Square D, which does a lot of home automation and a lot of home energy products, that's also Schneider Electric.
Well, that's like so cool. And like, how did you even get in there? Because you say like a 200-year-old business, right? So they've kind of been here, probably like they've been like for me, they've been here like 4 times the amount I've even been on this planet, right? They have been
Right.
here a long, long time. So how did you even find them, or what drew you towards them?
So it's kind of a long story, right? So I'll start kind of towards the end,
Okay.
which was after my tour at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I spent 4.5 years there in vulnerability management, doing a lot of proactive risk reduction on open attack surface for critical infrastructure organizations. And that's just fancy words for using open source tools like Shodan or Census. And what we're doing is we're taking an attacker first approach, and we're asking ourselves, where's that low hanging fruit? What is, if I'm an attacker and I've only got, so much time before I'm caught, what would I do that's known, that I know is going to be effective, that's going to have the maximum amount of impact? So we took that approach at CISA, and the team, what we did was we partnered with manufacturers like Schneider Electric, right, who have very large footprints in the global space, especially in critical infrastructure in terms of manufacturing, energy, production, and transmission. And we asked them to partner with us, sharing information back and forth on how we're finding their devices, giving them, heads up on, the products that are out there, allowing them more lead time to find fixes and prevent incidents before they happen.
That's actually it's like a symbiotic relationship in a sense, because if they have all of these like products like around the planet, and then you guys could like tap into those products while also keep them safe as well, it's really like a symbiotic relationship. And that's something I've seen more in like just like, because when I was young, when I heard business, I thought it was like an isolated business, but especially the deeper I get into it, I'm like, oh, everyone is in bed with each other, like everyone is engaged,
Absolutely.
everyone is kind of trading this or that, and everyone knows each other. So that's like wonderful. And CISA, right? You were at CISA, you said, right?
That's
So
correct.
tell me about that, because CISA is a name I've heard my managers speak about like all the time. Oh, CISA this, like CISA that, CISA this, CISA that. So for those who don't know, like what is CISA and what role does it play in like the cyber industry? Because I hear about it pretty much every other day. So definitely
So,
share
yeah,
that.
my time at CISA was amazing. I can speak more highly of it. What CISA is essentially America's Cyber Defense Agency. So when you think about who's protecting hospitals, who's protecting dams, who's protecting energy companies, who's protecting, everyday citizens to make sure that the lights come on, the water is clean, and that cyber actors are not negatively impacting our networks and systems, that's what CISA is doing. That's their core mission. Their core mission is to defend the .gov. So think about your federal agencies and also critical infrastructure. So CISA is out there ensuring that we have these nefarious actors that are becoming more and more prolific. They're getting more and more sophisticated in their attacks. And frankly, things are becoming more and more connected. So the attack surface is immense. And, for good or bad or indifferent, gaps are there. Just like with any other instance of your vehicle, your house, things need to be shored up. You need to be proactive in your defense. So that's what CISA is out there doing every day.
And it's beautiful because I feel like, especially being in the States, like there's so much privilege we have here, but there's really like millions of people behind the scenes kind of helping this whole culture and like this whole country kind of stay in place. So definitely shout out to all the CISA people and all the cyber people, and even just the people who just protect citizens in general, right? Because like cyber is like, it's become abstract because like the armies and you got to have ships and guns, right? But now in the cyber world, you gotta protect your digital life as well. There's definitely a lot to think about. And be like for that, what would just get you into the cyber industry in general? Because even to just get into CISA, that's like huge, right? So how did you even start, and how did you like pivot your way up to getting into CISA?
Right. So that started in my my Army career. So I did 7 years in the U.S. Army as a signal officer. So I got out as a 03 captain. And when I transitioned back in 2020, I asked myself, how do I continue serving, right? I believe service is important, however you do it, whether it's military, local, serving your community in some way possible, serving someone else. I think that's incredibly gratifying to me, and I think that's incredibly important to everyone as a society, right? Someone's got something to give that someone else can benefit from. So with that, I asked myself, okay, how could I continue serving as a civilian? And CISA at the time, like I said, this was 2020. So CISA had just done its first major reorg after being, created just 2 years prior by executive order, or excuse, not by executive order, by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act of 2017. It was a brand new agency that had tons of potential, that had a very important and specific mission set. And I told myself I wanted to be a part of that. So I did what I could to make sure that I pitched myself most effectively. I gained a lot of experience in federal networks, working in the Army. I knew sort of the lay of the land, but I can tell you this is the mission that CISA has is unlike anywhere else. Just the breadth and depth of the mission is just, it's hard to quantify, right? So we're talking about everything essentially within U.S. borders has some nexus to critical infrastructure. We're talking everything like schools, K-12 schools, universities, research facilities. All of these things have some piece of critical infrastructure in our nation because everything's so intertwined. We get so much value from all of our different pieces that there has to be someone looking out for those individual pieces and making sure that they're connecting all the dots. That's what CISA is there to do.
Wow, that's like beautiful. If there was a pitch for like CISA, that is it. Like that's like a beautiful like this overview of it, honestly. And like as you're saying, there's so much things that have to be protected here. And in your journey, so I know that we have to protect a lot of stuff. I don't know that it's probably not all like rainbows and rambutan's. It's not always like pretty, right? So what would you say if there was this two experiences you could say like your best, or like the most like sad experience you had while you were at CISA, and the most like beautiful experience, CISA or like the Army? Just that your whole cyber journey. So what's something you can say like was really, oh, this is beautiful, and something like this is really like sad on both sides of the spectrum?
So lucky for me, right? I joined CISA in 2020, so I experienced a lot of let's just say life-changing cyber events, right? So everything from SolarWinds was my first major project that I worked on when joining CISA, in December of 2020. That was the very first thing I worked on is working on the cyber supply chain. and then moving into, Log4j and all the other major incidents. And now, we're still dealing with the ramifications of Salt and Silk and Volt Typhoon, these nation state actors that are wreaking havoc on our networks. So these complex issues, right, that you can't just turn things off, you can't just reset them, right? We're talking about embedded threat actors that are, there waiting to proverbially push the button and, cause major damage on our networks, right? And everything in between, minor incidents, major incidents, hospitals being ransomware. We've seen situations where, threat actors, they'll take medical records and blackmail the patients themselves with the medical records. Uh, it's it's a very sobering realization to understand where and what people are willing to do
Right.
at the full at the full dismissal of the other person. But that's why we have to have people that are out there, attempting to do the right thing, making sure that we're working together, tying the pieces together, saying, hey, this hospital got hit last week. It's not unlikely that you could be next. And that's where a lot of our bread and butter comes from, is recognizing the event and then ensuring that there are no further casualties.
Yeah, and I feel like stuff like that is very important because at that time I wasn't super deep into cyber, right? So it's only like years later I'm going back and like, oh, what was a SolarWinds? What was a Log4j? And I think it said Salt type. I think I've heard of them as well. But for people who don't know, can you just give a quick summary of those like attacks and what happened? Because I feel like to appreciate the present, we really got to understand the past, especially in cyber. Because if you never experienced that, people probably don't see the value of it. Because I feel like the like people just going through life every day who aren't in cyber, they don't think about this stuff at all because it just never passes their feed, it just never passes their friend circle. They don't know. But for you, was there, right? Could you like tell us what it was and like how those things happen and like how it could be mitigated?
Absolutely, yeah. So three very distinct and different attack vectors with different threat actors involved. So SolarWinds was a major attack on the U.S. government that used, the SolarWinds technology. So I believe they've rebranded since. They're no longer called SolarWinds. I think they're called Enable now. But it was a major attack where essentially nation state threat actors had infiltrated the digital signing network for the certifications of the updates. So they had intercepted that network, and they were able to do is they were able to sign their own patch updates with nefarious code injected into it. So they permeated the entire federal government at the time. So this was late 2020, all the way probably through 2021, that there was a response to that. And when I say the entire federal government, I mean the DoD was majorly impacted. Other parts of the government were impacted as well. But what it led to was a major distrust in the networks at the time. So there was a lot of work that had to be done to build that trust back in, make sure we're doing the appropriate threat eviction, getting those threat actors out of there. And again, we're not dealing with run-of-the-mill just individuals. We're dealing with a nation state in this situation that is trying to cause significant damage to the country.
Wow. Yeah. It's like when people speak about non 11, I feel like it's kind of one of those things like where were you at when it happens?
Yeah.
Times that's wild. But like this is more so like the cyber, like the digital side, but both are like could be just as catastrophic in a sense. Definitely.
Absolutely. Right. So when we're talking about these digital impacts. We're talking about something that's, even if you turned it back on, right? How do you maintain it? How do you keep it? So that effectively what we're trying to do is, or what we were doing, right, and what the people at CISA are still doing, right? So now I work for Schneider Electric, and my focus is purely on, those energy management products within their business units. But it's intimately intertwined with the work that's being done at CISA. And that's really how I got introduced to the organization as a whole, was working at CISA and interacting with some of the great folks at Schneider Electric, seeing what the work that they were doing, seeing how willing they were to partner with the federal government to drive down risk, not just, for their namesake, but for the end user, which is the most important thing at this point in time. You and I, making sure that the products that are safe when we're using them, making sure that the materials that are being passed through those products are safe to use.
Yeah, no, all of that is critically important to think about. So I'm glad we have people like you who are as passionate about it to kind of keep those things up to date and intact. Because if not, a lot would just fall to the wayside. So no, I definitely do
Yeah.
appreciate that. Definitely.
There's tons of great professionals out there.
Yes.
Schneider Electric says they want to help, right? It sounds cliche, but that's it.
Yeah.
They see a problem set and they said, this is my lane that I can actually help the problem set.
Right. And that's definitely beautiful because I don't speak about it often, but that is something that definitely draws me towards cyber because when people ask me about it, I always say, imagine like a cyber cop. Like I'm trying to make it you just kind of stopping the bad guys, right? To make it simple for people. But cyber is definitely a beautiful industry. And outside of cyber, what do you like to do for fun, like hobbies or family or just things you like to engage with when you're free time?
So I'm an avid reader, right? Very much so into nonfiction. I've been into the Stoics, reading about Carl Jung, reading about Friedrich Nietzsche, just kind of getting more intellectual, I would say, trying to understand the reasons why. Because, it's really easy to look at life and, look at the impacts, but the why, right? Like, why do we go left instead of right? Why, do threat actors, perform this way? And everything has, generally has a reason, right? So when we're thinking about, cyber actors, there's some motivation there that can be gleaned and that needs to be understood. It can't just be as simple as we need to stop bad guys. I think there's a show that's out, and it is a show that my wife introduced me to, that she's like one of those people that watches Criminal Minds and stuff like that. But it's an incredible premise, right? So you have to understand why these people do these things. Because if you don't, you're just out there just playing whack-a-mole, just trying to stop the next thing from happening, instead of saying, okay, if I'm this type of bad guy and I'm looking for this type of vulnerability, how would I go about finding it? What's the easiest and most effective way to find it? What's the easiest and most effective way to exploit it? And what's my greatest ROI once I do it, right? Because there's threat actors that do things just because they like disruption. They just like to see things break. There are threat actors who want to have some financial gain out of it. And just understanding those different nuances and why people are doing things, I think is greatly important to, the field itself, because it's not quite law enforcement, right? You use the analogy cyber cop, but we still want to understand why these people do these things. And it all ties together, right? Even when we start going, if we take it back, many steps to the left, we start talking about secure coding practices. And why do some people code things one way or another? Or why do we still use, memory unsafe languages, even though we know that's the reason, right? We know today that that's the reason. That leads to most of the vulnerabilities that we have, is using unsafe memory unsafe languages, but we still do it. And of course, there's a reason, but understanding that reason and asking the question, the trade-off of hey, what's the trade-off of me, essentially rewriting my entire program versus, just hoping for the best, crossing my fingers, and all that stuff matters.
Oh, you really got me, especially at the memory safety part. Like everything you said was so spot on, and the memory safety part. I think it was the U.S. government. I think it was last year, or the year before. They said, "Oh, we need secure coding practices, this and that." And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were recommending Rust, right? And this is going to be a good segue to another question I have after this. But in your experiences, what programming languages have you looked at, or what programming languages do you feel like are a bit more secure than the other ones?
So that's such an interesting question. So here's what I will say. I will say this, because I'm not going to answer your question directly.
Okay.
I will say that Rust, like you said, has gained a lot of traction in that space. I will also say that it is not necessarily viable for everything to just be rewritten in Rust. And so there needs to be something in the middle. New things need to be created to be safe in the future. Older things, there needs to be some type of way to secure those as well. So it has to be two-part. It can't just be, all right, everybody stop doing everything. Let's start programming in Rust, because Rust has its issues. Rust has its backing from, a major corporation that perpetuates a lot of these vulnerabilities that we see, right? Hopefully they don't send their people after me. But yeah, so I mean, and that's just the nature of the business, right? Not saying that they're bad actors in this, but the product, the vulnerabilities are in their products as well. Everyone has a part to play, and that just further illustrates the holistic nature of this problem set. Every time you use anything, everything's connected, and we haven't even touched on the fact that open source software accounts for about 2/3 of all products that exist today. That stuff is everywhere. And this circles back to Log4j, right? Log4j, we found that library was in everything. And that's what made it such a huge deal, was because this one library that had essentially the keys to the kingdom, was just in everything.
And this is going to be a good segue, because like open source and like Linux, this stuff I really love, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because open source is like, oh, we coded this for free, we're going to give it to the world for free, but it also is beautiful, but then it's like it can be a risk, because if people are just like making this for free, like you have a dev in Russia, you have a dev in Kenya, you have a dev in Minnesota, you have a dev like all over the world, right? And they're all contributing to this project, right? And who are the people like checking all this stuff to just make sure that it is safe? Because because I see this with a lot of corporate companies, they literally scrape open source and just make their own version of it.
Well, yeah, because it's the most cost-effective thing to do, right? Someone already did the legwork,
right?
And it's free, and all I have to do is tweak something, put my trademark on it, and boom, there it is. Yeah. But but that's the risk, right? That's the trade-off. And it's up to the community when we're talking about open source, is being tapped into that community and having, essentially many cyber cops looking at the same thing, saying, hey, there's something wrong here with this code. This code has this line in here that's, doesn't have any real functional purpose. Why is it there? And then raising the flag for the rest of the community to investigate. But that is, you've identified, that's the inherent risk of using open source code. Is it could be from anywhere, and anyone could, have a say in what goes into it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, because I think in the future, like I'm gonna go more open source of everything I want to do. But the thing that always confused me, I'm like, how do people make money in open source? But I think I understand it, because with like Red Hat, for example, mm-hmm. Red Hat and also Databricks, they like made Apache Spark for like data analysis and data and like engineering, but then they had a premium version that you got to pay for, basically. And the same thing with like Red Hat, you get like this Linux stuff for free, but to like maintain it, now you got to pay. So I think he's basically like a free, is it freemium? He's like a free tier, you open source, and then you have mm-hmm. your more advanced version that's make people pay for. And I think that's how the open source businesses are like running, or like how to become profitable.
Yeah, the open source, the entire community is very interesting in of itself. I learned a great deal from those folks, right? So a lot of the work that I did wasn't necessarily directly into open source, but peeling back the onion and trying to understand.
Quick, not so we're going. So could you explain to people what is open source? Because I realize we're just over here talking about it. Some people probably don't know what is open source. So firstly, sure. Could you explain what is open source so the people could like be up to speed?
Okay, so yeah, I'll make it really simple, right? So open source, let's say I want to build a widget that counts all the beans in my house, right? So I open up my notepad, right? And I start coding in C, because I don't want it to be memory safe, but I want it to be lightweight and I want it to work. So I start coding it in C. And then I say, hey guys, on GitHub, look at my bean counter. And I publish it on Git, and then I'll have a commit to Git. And I say, everybody can have a look at it, optimize as you will. And then, a large corporation finds my open source bean counter and says, hey, if we just, tweak this code just a little bit, we could actually patent this and make it our own bean counter. And then you can get sold, Gabe's bean counter with a fancy label on it for $29.99.
Yeah,
and that's open source in a nutshell.
The way you explained it is so funny, but that's actually like how it like usually goes. That's fascinating. Earlier, you were talking about your travels and you had a picture, right? I would love for you to show
Yeah.
the picture and like explain that like journey real quick.
Okay. Yeah. So I think you're referring to this one
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with Mr. Linus Torvalds here, right?
The one and only. That's so
So yeah. So I kind of ran up on him at a conference at an open source conference and said, hey, like I know that everyone wants to take a picture with you, but you have to take this picture of me. So, and luckily I had made a few friends at the conference and someone gave me a nod and said, he's good. So that's how I got my picture.
That's so cool. And yeah, and like for like those of you who don't know, like Linus Torvalds, he's basically the guy who helped create. Well, he created Linux because the Richard Stallman, the other guy, he created GNU, which had a lot of different programs. And Linus Torvalds came with like the kernel, which is basically like the heart of the operating system. And he kind
He's
of like
very passionate about the kernel.
yeah.
Do not ever speak ill of the kernel.
Yeah, so like he kind of helped create Linux and also Git as well, the version control system that a lot of software engineers use to kind of keep track of their code. He made those two things, and these are two things that a good chunk of cyber and developer and tech people in general use like pretty much on a daily like basis. So he's a pretty big deal in the cyber industry. And you said you went to Japan for that, so they're definitely talking
Right.
about that like travel. Yeah.
So it was an open SSF conference. So Software Security Foundation. It's kind of an offshoot of the Linux Foundation. And essentially, they just brought together a bunch of minds from the open source community. Saw a lot of major players, a lot of large corporations were present there. And CISA was invited. So myself, and one of my bosses at the time, who leads the vulnerability management subdivision within the cybersecurity division at CISA, and the director of the threat hunting subdivision of the cybersecurity division, and me, right? So I don't know why I got invited as well, but I got to play tag along with two very prominent folks that are still at CISA today, right? Sandra Radesky and Jermaine Roebuck, two consummate professionals doing excellent work on behalf of the American people.
Well, and that's like beautiful because it's beautiful, especially like being around people who are like doing such great things. This is like so inspiring, right? Because you go to these events like, well, this dude just made this crazy thing that changed our world, like literally changed the world that we like engage with this stuff. So it's definitely beautiful just to be around people doing great things. I feel like it makes it easier and more fun for us to do like great things. Speaking about great things, you have like 1 million plaques behind you. So if you could just explain what some of those are. Yeah.
So some of this stuff is just things that you gather over the years. I've been fortunate to have a pretty decent career in cyber, right? Like I said, beginning in the Army, and then translating into government work as a civilian, and now in the private sector. And essentially, it's just mementos, things that you get every once in a while. Some of these are awards that I've received from the Secretary of Homeland Security at the time, Alejandro Mayorkas. There are some other things I've received some commendations from U.S. senators. This thing right here over this shoulder, that's my master's degree from Johns Hopkins. But there are also some really important things to me, like this picture of my son playing soccer, right? Right. So it kind of just encapsulates my life, right? Some of the things that I want to do. I'm a collector, right, of all things. So I've got like tons of books that I just collect. Obviously some are better than others, but whenever I'm an avid recommender of books, right? So if I'm talking to someone and they bring up a topic, I'm like, oh man, I have a book for that. Like, here, why don't you take a read of this and tell me what you think about it. So that's why I collect these things, right? Jen Easterly was a avid, a huge proponent of Rubik's Cubes. So I've got like a stack of Rubik's Cubes up there that I collected from every time I got to meet her. So yeah, just collecting stuff so it can catch dust on my shelf.
But that's like really cool though. It sounds like really fun because I feel like, especially having like a hobby or things that you collect is like a really beautiful thing because it's kind of like a extension of your like self, right? It could take you back to like a certain place or a certain energy. So that's definitely
It's like a roadmap. It reminds me of where, when, and where, right? So I can look at a thing and say, oh yeah, this happened at that time, or that happened. This is when I was in Japan. This is when I was in Italy. This is, everything's got a story connected to it.
and that's just like so like beautiful. And I wanted to ask you as well. So you said you have a son, right? So I wanted to know how has your journey been? What's the word, with family and your career, right? How have you balanced both, or how have you integrated both? I would say, yeah.
So I have two sons. I have a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. My 10-year-old sadly thinks my job is boring. And sometimes he's right. Sometimes, he's right. When my job is boring, which is usually good because it means that I'm not doing anything. So he thinks my job is boring. He wants nothing to do with cybersecurity. Hopefully he'll come around someday. He's too good for cyber. But, I take the opportunity to have the, other things that we can do together, like playing sports, books and other things like that. Trying, and he enjoys computer games, right? He enjoys, playing video games. So that's another one of those things that we can connect on, even though he doesn't care how it works like I do, but he enjoys them.
It's like interesting because I feel like I've seen it really takes some time for children to go into adulthood to really like perceive their parents properly, or really even appreciate them properly, right? Because like even like with my like parents, right? It's like as I get older, I'm like, oh shoot, like my mom and dad, they really did a lot. Like they really did a lot. It takes time to actually mature into that in a sense. But yeah, but it's good to have at least like some things that you could like connect with. The video games I feel like are a clear like I'm not sure if this is the thing, but I know a lot of software engineers or tech people in general, they were like gamers originally. Like everyone was like, I want to make a game, right? So that's
everybody wants to be a gamer. Yeah, I definitely wanted to be a video game tester as a kid.
Literally, in high school, that's what I used to tell like people. Oh, yeah, be a video game tester, a video game designer.
I was promptly, instructed by my family that wasn't a viable career path. And now that we have esports, right? Like I constantly remind them that they took away my burgeoning, esports career that I could have had.
Wow, that's crazy. You could have been like an esports like master by now,
right? Because that's not a real career. You can't. Don't play video games.
And it's so interesting because I feel like the idea of what careers are is drastically changing. Because even the stuff I like to do for work, right? I'm basically working on my laptop like all the time, right? There's some people who literally do not consider that work. For some people, work is literally going to a physical space, physically clocking in, physically being there for 8 hours, and physically doing everything. Some people that can't, and I feel like it actually takes time to understand that, like, oh yeah, typing on a laptop, it can be actual work because the amount of stuff you got to think and like process through, it's a lot.
It's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
And there's some days where I'm like, I want to do something physical. Like I would, and I like, please, I'd be a landscaper for a day. Like just so I can do something that doesn't make me have to send one more email. Like, and I mean, it sounds so bad to say it that way, but it is. It's emotional and taxing. To look at screens all day, look at constantly be in a state of analysis of what's going on, making sure that the right things happen, because there's huge implications for doing the wrong or right thing, right? So tomorrow, for example, right? Tomorrow's Patch Tuesday, the Microsoft holiday. Yeah. So there are going to be a lot of organizations that are going to push a lot of things out, and some of those things are not going to work. And that's going to be a significant event for a lot of professionals tomorrow. It's sometimes the worst day of the month for some professionals because of the ramifications of pushing out a bad patch, of not having a fix available of something significant, right? Or if you have a high-profile customer, that's not satisfied with your turnaround time, right? So we've had this situation where, large customers are saying, hey, you need to give us a fix in 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks to give us a fix. We spend a lot of money with you. We've got a really big name recognition. You don't want this to go badly for you. And, we have to respond to that. We have to say, okay, in order to protect the organization, to protect our our name and our brand, we have to perform. We have to respond appropriately, and that's our responsibility as defenders.
Yeah. Well, and it's very interesting hearing these stories because I have these like stories with my like managers and other teammates. Because just like I'm like, especially the closer you get to the C suite, the more like political stuff gets, right? And stuff gets very serious very quickly, and it's like there's pressure from this organization, and then they have this deadline, but they didn't tell you, so
Right.
now they're rushing you. It's like so is like the government. It's literally like being in the government. There's so much different, but
All
especially
of
if
it
you
is
work in
small
tech
p
in the government.
politics. All
Yes,
of it,
it,
every piece of it, because everyone's got something at stake.
right, right, right.
And that's the most important piece to understand is it's not just us, not just Schneider Electric, right? It's a Schneider Electric customer, because Schneider Electric's customer, they have to answer to someone too.
Right,
They've
right.
got to answer to their superiors. They've got to
Yeah,
answer to their customers.
right.
So everyone's being held accountable,
Yeah.
and we're being held accountable by legislation. So Schneider Electric, is, like I said, is French based. So we're
Mm.
being held accountable by U.S. legislation and European Union
Oh,
legislation.
sheesh.
So I've got to know what's okay in the EU and okay in the US.
GDPR and all that. Hey,
Right.
that's
So
crazy.
GDPR, CRA, which is going to go into effect, in next year or so.
Wow.
So all of these things that are happening at the exact same time, and we've got to toe this line to make sure that all of our customers are, appropriately taken care of, and that's our responsibility as the organization, as the manufacturer. We want you to buy our stuff because we want you to say, hey, even if there is something wrong with it, Gabe's going to answer my email when I send him an email and say, we're working on the fix for you.
Wow. That's a whole world. Cause like you gotta think about Europe laws and the US laws.
Think about it every time
That's
you email someone
ridiculous.
at tech support and you're like, hey, I got a bug in this. And you're just like, man, what are they doing over there? Like,
Wow. Yeah, it's
we're
like
responding to 1,000 other emails similar.
thousand.
And
Yeah.
and we just came out of the summer, and the summer is peak time for
Right.
pen testing, because everybody wants to have their fancy thing for Black Hat and DEF CON. So we just came out of a very busy summer of pen
Yeah.
testers just picking our stuff apart.
Right, right. And I think it's very important to like be able to put yourself in other people's shoes a lot. Like if you're a employee, sometimes I feel like it's worth it to put yourself in the boss shoes, right? If you're the boss, sometimes it's worth it to put your shoes in the investor shoes. If you're an investor, sometimes it's worth it to view what the customers need, right? Because there's so much different people, right? It's not just like one or two people. It's like millions,
Right.
thousands of people, right? So there's a lot of stuff to think about, and it could definitely make your head spin very easily. But you were saying earlier the fact that we have to stare at screens all the time. It could be a lot of what do you call it? Alert fatigue. They call it where you just have like so much different things you got to respond
Right.
to. So how do you like juggle that? Like how do you keep your like physical health and mental health like stable when dealing with all this different cyber stuff happening all the time?
Get up from your desk. Just get up from your desk. Walk outside. Listen to some birds. Like you just have to get up. You got to go touch grass. Like you have got to, because you'll get sucked in so rapidly into this world of everything happening at once, because emails are near instantaneous, right? So from someone's thought to your inbox, and because it's really important to them, doesn't necessarily is really important in the grand scheme of things. So being able to filter,
True.
being able to understand how to prioritize, talking to your teammates, collaborating. I'm a huge proponent of teamwork, right? I go out of my way, or at least I try to involve other people, and that's for a couple of things. First reason is so I'm not biased against my own ideas. Do I
Right.
think I have good ideas sometimes? Sure. Are all of my ideas good? No, absolutely not. And not only that, there might be a piece of information that I don't have that
Right.
the other person may be able to provide to me and say, hey, I know that this is a really good idea, but you didn't think about this thing, that happened before you got here, or something that I'm working on at the same time. So that's why collaborating is incredibly important across the organization, and understanding, the mission set of those people. So in my position, right, I don't necessarily work on the ones and zeros of the products, right? I work with, technicians that do the physical manual work on the products and rewrite code and write fixes and patches. However, I am responsible for, reviewing problem sets with them, going over, any reports of vulnerabilities, making sure that the reported vulnerability and the fix match, that what in fact is being put out is going to fix what the problem is, making sure that we're appropriately rating the vulnerability so that we're scoring it appropriately so people can respond, with the appropriate amount of vigilance. So all of those things matter, and understanding that technician and how that technician does his or her work, is paramount when it comes to responding to folks on the outside, right? I've got to be the firewall between the technician and the outside world, but that means I've got to understand what the technician is saying, and I've got to loop in the technician if something happens. If someone asks me a question that's a little bit outside of my scope because I didn't build the widget, I've got to be comfortable saying, hey Paul, hey Mike, hey John, whomever, someone asked me a really funky question about this widget. I know we did this. How does this impact, the widget? And because again, we're beholden to our customers, because everything we do is going to have second, third, and fourth order impacts.
And you touched on such a beautiful point, because I feel like the people haven't been focused on the social aspect of the company, the people being focused on the software aspect of the company, but there has to be the person who's able to kind of protect and go between both, right? Because I've seen it's like a meme, right? Because it seems that the more technical, advanced a person is, the less social skills they have, or the more social skills someone have, the less technically. I know that's not always the case, but that's like the meme, or that's kind of like the joke, right? But I feel like it's beautiful to have people who could kind of tap into both worlds and both like realities. And with yourself, do you ever want to like just go more like technical, like, hey man, I'm tired of all this people meet and stuff, let me just like code this project by myself? Do you ever think about that, or have you ever thought about that, or you feel like the social side is more so where your like energy is like the best fit?
So this is actually an incredibly poignant topic for a couple reasons. So the joke I usually make, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Office Space. So it's a movie from the late 90s, early 2000s called Office Space. And there's a character in the movie, and he said, they asked him, what do you do here? And he says, well, I take the requirements from the customers and I bring them to the engineers. And he says, okay, well, why? What else do you do? He's like, well, I take the products from the engineers and I bring them to the customers. He said, well, why doesn't the customer just talk to the engineers? They're like, well, because the engineers can't talk to the customers. That's why I'm here. And it's really funny, but as you said, right, it's real. It's a real thing where you really have to have someone that can, translate, real world words into, ones and zeros and back and forth.
Right.
So, and if I had to choose a side, I would probably choose the interpersonal side.
Yeah.
And that's only because I enjoy these conversations, right? The conversation we're having right now. I truly do. I enjoy exchanging ideas, understanding how people work, why they make decisions, why they're, why this is important to them, because all that matters. Again, it all matters in the grand scheme of things, right? If you're telling me that you really need a fix for this product and you need it in 2 weeks, well, okay, there's got to be some reason why you're doing that. Like, that's such an arbitrary thing for it to have no reason. So understanding that reasoning will help me prepare for the next time we have to do a 2-week drill on a product.
Yeah, I definitely I definitely see the value in that, and I'd always recommend people to try to step out of your comfort zone, because I feel like a lot of people, they're just so good at their social skills that they never try the technical stuff, or certain people are so technical that they never try the social stuff. But try to get out of your comfort zone, right? Because even now I'm doing this like podcast, but like even my mom would say when I was young, people thought I was mute because I didn't talk, right? So I'm not a naturally social person, right? It's just like as I've grown in my kind of experience, I've seen the value of it. Because once you're able to, like, I always say this, half your life is in your own mind and head, right? Half your life is dealing with yourself, right? That half of life is dealing with people. So if you could master yourself and you can deal with people, you pretty much have majority of life figured out. Like that's honestly it. But it makes me think about what you're saying about the psychology, which also makes me think about the social engineering part about it too, because I think that's a very important point. Just how people think is a very, very important point.
Oh, absolutely, right. So social engineering is a huge attack vector, within our business. And it's one of those things that gets overlooked all too often, but because it's not exciting, right? To say that I called the help desk and the help desk gave me the password. Like it's so low tech, and it doesn't seem like it took a lot of effort, but understanding the right thing to say to the right person at the right time, to make it all fit to where that person doesn't ask, additional questions. And I think this happened in Las Vegas last year at Caesar's Palace. It was a social engineering attack where they took down the entire casino network. So, things can escalate very rapidly, especially when you're, dealing with someone who may have a lot of access. We're talking about someone, who may work on the kernel, right? If we're talking about open source, someone that may be a full stack developer and they're working in the back of the house and they've got everything. They've got access to all of the things. So understanding how things happen, I think is really, I know I've said that a number of times, but I think that's really important and it's missed quite often in our community because of the technical aspect of it. The ones and zeros are supremely important. But that's one of those things that we have to make sure that we're having, a diversity of thought and experiences when we're hiring for these positions, right? So having the same, STEM, we need a STEM degree, and they've got to have this much experience. They've got to have coded in Python, C, C++, and and these rubrics that are so stringent. All you've done is you've created an echo chamber of the same people with the same ideas, right? So,
Jeez, yeah.
having someone in the room who's worked on some policy and made the shift into more technical, action. So, CISA, and I saw this, and it was very interesting to me. CISA employs a lot of lawyers in non-law positions. And I asked myself why. Like, why are lawyers attracted to cybersecurity work? And I know about 3 personally. I don't necessarily work on the law or the policy within, these organizations. They work on the technical and the operational work. And it's a little counterintuitive, but it's all about how the person thinks and how they respond to, an instance or an incident, right? If you're thinking, because all it is logical thinking, logical reasoning, after a certain point. So if you're not pressing the keyboard, generally it's logical reasoning when you're trying to do, the after action or the root cause analysis on an issue. So being able to say, okay, if I am a person who's not necessarily, the most sophisticated threat actor, but I got my hands on, on Kali Linux and I was tinkering, right? And that's how a lot of folks get their first taste of disruption.
Yeah, I know. Like Kali Linux was definitely like a turning point in my journey. I remember I first got it, and I was
because it's cool. There's like all these tools. You can do stuff. Yeah. It is right there. You can just download. You can put it on anything. It's lightweight. You can put it on a Raspberry Pi. You can walk around with it. You can plug it into anything.
Yeah,
it's an amazing tool set.
Right.
That it's like carrying around a loaded gun though. Right. So
pretty much. If
you're in the wrong hands, you've just given someone a very deadly weapon. But at the same time, sophisticated, motivated threat actors, they're not going to let something, like access to Kali Linux stop them.
Right. And the point where you're speaking about the lawyers being working at, I think it actually makes sense because I feel like different industries, I feel like usually people of certain like mentalities or certain energies lean towards different industries, right? And I feel like lawyers are people that are very punctual and like exact and very
they pay attention to detail.
Yes,
like all of these factors that matter when you're doing this type of research, doing this type of work. So, and I use that story because there's no one entry point into the field. So the person that's out there that wants to break into cybersecurity, but they got a bachelor's degree in political science or whatever, that doesn't stop you. Leverage that experience and make yourself more unique than a person like. So my undergrad is in mathematics and my master's in cybersecurity. So I'm pretty cookie cutter in the industry, right? But there are others that have broad experience, especially if you lean further into policy work. The field gets enormous.
And that's a perfect segue to a point that I always have to speak to like every guest about. So in cyber, I'm learning that there's different routes people take, right? But one thing I do know, right, is there's certifications, there's college, there's clearances, there's
Hmm.
actual skills, and then there's networking as well. But the first three, I wanted to get your view on those, like the certifications, clearances, and college. How much have those? What has been your experience with them, and how have they helped your cyber career? And which one would you say kind of helped you elevate the most out of all of those?
So I will say that when going to CISA, um, having the experience within the military and already having a clearance helped. But that was going into government work. So if you know that you want to be
Yeah.
in government, there are benchmarks, milestones that are pretty well articulated that you can hit to get into government work. I mean, and obviously there are other paths to it, but already having a clearance, already having experience with the federal government, that all that helps. I would say that in most places, the bachelor's degree has become more of a box check as opposed to, because it doesn't really validate experience, right? I would say any day if I'm hiring, I would take, someone who's self-taught and can validate their experience over, a fresh college grad. And that's for a number of reasons, right? It depends on the role, right? What I'm trying to hire for. If I'm trying to hire, a SOC analyst that needs to go into work right now, yeah, I need someone that's got that experience that I can plug and play. They know what to do. They know how to write they know how to write scripts. They know how to do this work today. I'm trying to, put someone into a role that requires, maybe writing, maybe it requires, some type of analysis on, intelligence or something like that. That's totally different. But it all matters for the position you want. So I would say that experience supersedes all.
Agreed.
Certifications are validations of experience. So what we've seen a lot in the industry as of late is a lot of people shooting for the highest certification they can get and attaining it, right, and rightfully so. But what that does is it doesn't allow for the years of experience to match the certification that you've gotten. So
Uh,
you're able to prove you're able to validate that you can, answer these questions, which is important. And I don't want to discount that. But what it does is if the experience doesn't match the requirement for the certification, so let's take the CSSP, for example. So that has a 5-year minimum requirement to have the designator of a CSSP. So if we see, an applicant that's got maybe 2 or 3 years, but they've got a CSSP, then, it's like, okay, that's nice, but we're talking about a mid to senior level certification that's really far removed from the technical aspects of the work and more focused on how are you going to respond if the building floods, right? Or if there's, you lose power. And, that's how those more senior certifications are geared towards. They're geared toward managers and,
right.
But if you're getting, certifications in something, more practical, like you're getting, I have always encouraged Security Plus, right? Security Plus is a great validator of entry to mid-level understanding of network and security. It's got a nice mix of both. I know if you got your Security Plus, you know what certain protocols are.
I just got it last week. I literally just
Congrats.
last week. Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, that's a major achievement, right? Because what you've done is you've distinguished yourself amongst your peers by saying, hey, I have validated my understanding of these topics.
Right.
Because there's one thing to be able to say, yes, this, I don't want to have Telnet open, so we're going to close this port, right? Like, yeah, I got it. But why? Like, why are we doing that? And if you can validate and articulate why, we don't use, SSH anymore, why we use TLS, or excuse me, SSL, why we use TLS, that's important to be able to articulate the reasoning why, because you're going to run into that organization that's going to still be using SSL3. And you're going to ask them, why are you using SSL 3.0? And because if you upgrade to TLS, it's going to break their network.
Oh wow.
Because their network is archaic and they can't afford to, upgrade their entire network because they're still running, Windows XP because that's the last stable version of Windows that they had that they can afford. Because God forbid they upgrade to Vista or 8, then they're worse off.
Yeah, give me that, brother. XP now? They're in an XP.
You will see there are things out there. There are things out there that are troubling.
Yeah.
Because just like you would see like a 1991 Corolla still driving on the street.
Right.
It's the exact same. It still works. It still gets the job done. So people are going to use it. And nothing against doing that. Absolutely. If it's secure enough for your business purpose, absolutely do that. And it's incumbent upon defenders to make it work.
Yeah, no, like everything you said is on point because the certificate is an interesting landscape, right? Because it's interesting because I'm getting in the industry, right? So I feel like I have more experience than I do certifications, right? So now I'm trying to go back and balance it up. Even with the college stuff, I'm trying to go back and kind of balance it out so I can be kind of like did across the board. Because as you were saying, it really does just check the box. Like I know it might sound very sad and extreme, but it's really just so the applicant tracking system doesn't knock your resume out.
So you can beat the AI track. Yep, that's it.
Literally, it might sound very grim, but that's actually 9 times out of 10 the case. Because, of course, that's why networking is so important. Because I feel like the face-to-face and the warm leads will always be better than this code, just doing it straight from the company site. Knowing people in the company is always a much warmer route to take. But definitely balancing out all of those, the certifications, the clearances, college, because they do help. Because there are people who don't have, and it's interesting. I don't give blanket advice, right? Because a couple years ago, it was college is yes or no, right? Certifications is not a yes or no question. It depends on what part of the industry do you want to go in, what part of your career are you in, do you have a family, where do you live? There's so much that goes into it. But I definitely recommend everybody, especially if you get into cyber, do all of it, right? Do all of it. Every single thing you can. The
do free certifications, go to conferences, talk to people.
Yes.
Because it's a tight-knit community.
Yes.
It is surprisingly tight-knit. All the big players know each other. And it's interesting because after a while, certifications, I don't want to say stop mattering, but it balances out to where people aren't so concerned about what certifications you have.
Right.
They want to know about what experiences you've had. So I know an executive, who's got Security Plus. He's like, I think I'll go get, my CISM or CISP at some point. But, he's already an executive with Security Plus. So it makes I don't want to say it makes no difference to him, but it's one of those things where if you go into, if you're interviewing for a C-suite position, no one's going to ask you what certifications you got, right? They're going to want to know what's the last thing you did in your last role. So we're talking about a guy who is, formerly, a deputy director at the FBI, right? So, you're
already in. You're already in, brother. Yeah.
He's got the appropriate experience.
Right.
So where a certification is okay, someone would be like, all right, fine. Good. I'm glad you got that Security Plus. Tell me about your last role. And that's kind of the experience that I'm starting to have now, which is very interesting. I spent so much time, getting certifications, validating, my experiences, that now people don't really care about what certifications I have anymore. They care about what's the last thing what projects I worked on.
Right.
What types of impacts did I see in my last role.
Yeah, the conversation definitely does change once you're more so a leader or a manager or in the the C-suite. The conversation changes once you're knows. And I know sooner or later I'm gradually going to go up that path because I've already have experience kind of leading teams here and there, right? So I could definitely see me going down that path in the future, but no, definitely having a balance of all of them. So we have probably a minute left, right? So I wanted to give you time to share any upcoming stuff you have, projects, links, websites, YouTubes. Let's say anything you wanted the people to leave with.
Yeah, so what I'll share is that everyone's path is different. Do not measure your path against someone else's, even if you're trying to go for the same role.
Right.
Because everything can and should be unique. When you start building these echo chambers of ideas and thoughts and processes, that's when the threat actors can come in and they can figure out your system very easily. So understanding why people do things, having that diversity of thought. And I know, a lot of folks are avoiding that word lately because of, kind of the nature of the political environment. But the word diversity means more than, how you look. It's the type of experiences you've had. It's whether or not you took, one course over another.
Right.
It's whether or not you understand international policy, because all of those things matter when you're talking about working at a multinational. So it helped, that I, to work at a multinational like Schneider Electric, to have had experiences talking to, other nations, working with other governments and their cyber issues, working with the Canadian government, working with the British government, being able to speak and, speak their version of cyber to them and their unique problem sets, because these problem sets are widespread, they're huge, they're massive, but there are some nuances there that are only applied to the US that the French government's not concerned about, right? Everyone in the world doesn't have the same problem. So
right.
Just like everyone in the world doesn't have the same problem, everyone in the cybersecurity community doesn't have the same problem, and we also don't have the same skill sets. So highly encourage people, if you want to get into the industry, mark your path, get there. I've seen folks come from all walks of life. Really what the industry, especially, myself, what we're looking for is we're looking for people that can, think and be agile in their thoughts. Brought it back to agile, being nimble in their thoughts, being able to understand, why people are doing things, what drives these actions, right? If we see, if we're seeing some type of activity, let's say, we're seeing a natural disaster in one part of the country, are we going to see, after effects of cyber attacks in that area? Because now the infrastructure is worried about coming back up, not necessarily security. So things like that, being able to see past, the impact.
You spoke on so many beautiful points. The bit I wanted to add to it, the non-comparison part. Honestly, because in cyber, especially on social media, right? It's just every day someone is getting, oh, is this here? Oh shoot, James. James paused it in the background, but you are good though. Yeah, the last thing I was saying was just to add a bit to what you were saying, the non-comparison part, right? Especially on social media. Literally every single time I go,
social media is bad for your brain. Oh my God, it's bad for your brain. There are studies. It's bad for your brain.
It's bittersweet because it's motivating most times, because everyone is getting their everyone is in college, everyone is starting a business, everyone has their CompTIA, right? It's so lit. But then again, if you're depending upon what state of mind you're in, that could be very overwhelming, because now damn, everyone else is getting this stuff and I'm here not doing anything, right? So I feel like that's why it's important to spend time alone in solitude, meditating and journaling, and really just focus on becoming a better version than you were yesterday. That's
100%. That you couldn't have said it better. 100%. Just be the best version of yourself, right? Yeah. Because if I'm comparing myself to somebody else, then I should have had my PhD, about 20 years ago. if I'm on social media, right? Because everyone's doing something.
Yeah.
But it's not about that. You're absolutely correct. It's about charting your path and defining what success is for you, right? So for me, I'm satisfied with my career. I'm happy with the things I've done. I'm happy with the programs and the projects I've worked on. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, the conversations I've had, right? So this conversation tonight, truly appreciate you, giving me the platform to talk, and the people I've met along the way.
Yeah. No, but I definitely appreciate your time, because you had wisdom and you were funny too. So you had the wisdom and you were making everyone laugh. So I definitely appreciate it tremendously, and that we'll definitely be in touch. And thank you to everyone who's watching. And also, if you guys know any other Black cybersecurity professionals you think will be a good fit, please reach out to me on either LinkedIn or the BIC Discord or my email. Just reach out, and then we could 9 times out of 10 get them on. But thank you for your time, and